Russell from the Community Supported Agriculture Network, and we've brought these two amazing growers to share their 30 years of experience growing vegetables and other things. And yeah, we put this session on because we've heard a lot from our CSAs over the last few years that the weather is crazy, and how do you kind of work out what to put in the ground and when to take stuff up and how to look after everything you're growing and keep all your members or customers happy in these uncertain weather times. So we've got Andy Dibben from Abbey Home Farm and Dan Burston from our School Farm CSA in Dartington. So I'm going to hand over to them.
Cool. Thanks for coming and listening, everyone. So yeah, me and Dan are going to, it might be a little bit doom and gloom to start with because it's kind of the subject we're talking about. But yeah, so we're going to talk about crop planning for uncertain times. I'm going to do the first half. I'm actually going to talk a bit bigger picture about farm systems and other stuff beyond just which crops to grow and things like that. And then Dan's going to take it in a bit more focused on crops. So we'll crack on. So yeah, I mean, one of the biggest, the title is Crop Planning for Uncertain Times, and the key word there is uncertain, and one of the biggest challenges, I suppose, and to sum it up, I think in 2022 we almost hit 40 degrees at the farm, which is incredibly challenging weather to produce UK vegetables in. I then spent the whole of that winter crop planning for an even higher temperature summer the following year. Had a brilliant drought-proof crop plan, and then it rained solidly for 2 years. So it's the uncertain part of this that is the problem, and we just don't, whatever your best guess is, we have no idea what's coming next. So it's a beautiful day today. It's been pouring a rain all week. So what are we planning for? Essentially, we need to build a crop plan and a farm and a production system that can cope with extreme heat and drought, extreme rain and flood, extreme sudden or unexpected cold, and they're very different things though. So we've had extreme colds, we've had winters where it goes down to -12, -13 and kills like what should be winter hardy crops, like cabbages have had scorched by just intense cold. The other thing about cold is sudden. So if it's a really, really warm Indian summer and all your kales are growing great guns, and it's suddenly good, and this happened to Riverford a couple of years ago. They lost 10 acres of kale when it went from about sort of 15, 16 degrees to -10 overnight. And they lost the whole field in a night. I think it's probably more risky if you're down around Devon and Cornwall, and it's generally warmer and you suddenly get a hard frost. But also unexpected cold. So I've already had, on the farm, we've now had 4 frosts already. 3 last week, we had another one last night. It's a bit early for frosts, if I'm honest. We've had to bring all our squash already to the side of the field and cover them and stuff like that. So it's many different kinds of cold and different damages. And then I've lost count how many polytunnel covers I've lost in strong wind. The positive side is to get quite good at reskinning, but I'd rather be useless at reskinning and never lose them. So we've got to build a system that basically can deal with all of these weather types and deal with them without prediction. So we have no idea what the winter or the summer or any season is going to give us. So I'm going to chat a little bit about what we need to do to make ourselves more resilient to this. Lovely simple phrase at the top: build and design a resilient system. That's it, that's me finished. Dan, you're up. No. So the key thing here is unfortunately, neither me or Dan are going to bring out the bag any silver bullets that solve all these problems. We're just going to share some of our learnings in the last few years and what's worked for us. None of it is quick and easy. So I've got long game written there. It's already quite intense with the weather, but it's just going to get worse and worse and worse and get more and more intense. And I know that's a little bit depressing for this time on a Saturday morning, but that is the reality, and it's what we need to start preparing our farms for, basically. And a lot of that, before you even get your hands on any seeds or any vegetables, it's about the farm and your system on the farm. And some of the key things there that we really need to start sorting out our farm infrastructure for the future that's coming down the track at us. And in particular, we're talking about where you get your water from. You know, a lot of farms I give advice to are still getting water out of a tap on a metre. Now, if we keep getting droughts, there's two things I think, although there's one thing, everyone talks about rain capture. If you're going to capture enough rain to get through a 12, 14 week drought, you need a massive reservoir. So if that's what your plan is, you need to start saving up and building that now. Because without a doubt, we are going to get summers like they've been having in the Mediterranean, where it won't rain all summer. So if you're a commercial grower, we need to be able to deliver our crops in those kinds of conditions. And I expect that's within the next 10 years, we'll have a summer where it doesn't rain at all. You know, I really think that's going to happen. So where you get your water from, how you get that water out onto your crops, so your irrigation setup. I say to everyone, all my apprentices that I train on the farm, I said, if you can't put in an irrigation system, don't even try and be a commercial grower. Going forward, we used to be able to get away. There's loads of farms that used to trade quite happily with no irrigation or very low-tech irrigation. I think it's probably the biggest investment you should make in your farm if you're starting up a new business is absolutely amazing irrigation. I'm very lucky on the farm where we are. We've got very good irrigation. So I crave a drought. You know, I want a drought. I can make it rain or not rain. I can't do anything about 6 months of rain. So if you've got irrigation, droughts are less scary. Protected cropping, really, really important. I'm lucky we've got quite a lot of protected cropping, but anyone who was growing in 2012, when it did rain all summer, it's possibly still the worst growing year I ever had. Ever since then, wherever I am, the thing I want more and more and more of, and I'll bite anyone's hand off to get more, is protected cropping. It buffers you at both ends of the season. This year we were able to keep planting crops inside and producing crops through Hungry Gap, waiting for ground to dry outside. And it's a really good insurance policy. And the same again in the autumn. You know, we're already cropping out of our polytunnels now. The last successions of crops out in the market garden, in the field scales that should be cropping now are looking a bit sad. They've been like hammered by monsoon for 2 weeks. Mildews are creeping in places. Stuff that should be bulking up for one last harvest doesn't look like it's going to make it before day length shortens. So yeah, protected cropping is crucial. Windbreaks. Windbreaks, and for most of us, we're talking windbreaks, we're talking about planting trees as shelter belts. That's a long game. Get them in now, so when we do start getting 100-mile-an-hour winds across your farm, you've got something to buffer you. Shading, so maybe not outside at the moment, but if you look at the Mediterranean, there are lots of people losing crops in Greece, Italy, Spain. They're losing them just to light intensity, not to heat, just the sun is too intense for the crops. So it might not be something we're thinking about at the moment outside, but definitely inside polytunnels, glass houses. 2022 we put all kinds of shading up over polytunnels. We've actually planted agroforestry in our glass house deliberately to create more shading inside, so that when we do get 40-degree, mid-40-degree summers, we're not just leaving all of our crops exposed to direct sunlight. Drainage, so yeah, drainage can only do so much. Obviously, if you're looking at some of the fields that way, drainage is not going to do much about that. But it won't stop the flooding, but it will definitely help you clear that water faster and stop that compaction of your soils. The quicker you can get that water off the farm. The nice thing about this is all of the stuff I've just talked about costs a fortune. All right? It'll either take you a long time to save up for it, or you won't be able to afford it. I have to say, I think pretty much all of the things on that list, infrastructure-wise, there are grants available for. Okay, different parts of the countries. Anything to do with water, these days you can pretty much get most of the irrigation, water source, rain capture, all of that, most of the water boards will have grants and funding for. So it's worth looking that up. Yeah, and then there's lots of climate change resilience grants out there. Just look far and wide, not just within the farming grant network. There's loads of council grants, things like that you can access. The next most important thing, well, probably the most important thing about building a resilient system is looking after your soil, and that's absolutely crucial. Whether it be droughts or floods, they can both be incredibly damaging to soil structure and soil health. So at every point throughout the year, we really focus on making sure we're looking to the future. So whether it be the next season or the next year, maintaining soil health through extreme situations, so it'll bounce back and we can grow it again when the weather gets better. Have a plan ready for extremes. You know, I'm definitely not the best at this. You see a frost in the forecast, you're like, where the hell are all the fleeces? I know they're around here somewhere. But when you're crop planning, you need to be, every time you're planning to put a crop in, you need to be able to go, well, what am I going to do with this tender crop if we get a very late frost? Have I got enough fleece? Have I got enough mesh? Same with droughts, you know, have I got enough? You know, we always say when I teach crop planning at the farm, it's we do the crop planning, and the most important question is, can I pick it? Can I water it? Can I protect it? And that's actually a part of your crop planning, putting in place infrastructure, but also systems and behaviours that you can swing into action as soon as there's as soon as you're into a proper drought. You know how you're going to get, and you're going to be able to get the water around the fields. Same with sudden frosts. You know what needs meshing, how you're going to do it. You've got the time in your system, the staffing to help you do it. Every single site is completely unique. Different fields are completely unique. But we get at the bottom of our market garden in some of the coldest winters, we've gone down to -14. At the top of the market garden, it would have been about -5. So just in one field, we had a 10-degree temperature difference. So you need to start learning which parts of your farm behave in different ways. But also, there's a lot of habit of copying other people's systems at the moment. Especially with a lot of online stuff and a lot of books. I massively urge all growers to look at that stuff, learn from that stuff, but your farm is completely unique. You need to problem solve your own problems and understand how your own farm behaves in extreme weather conditions. And whatever plans we make now, and if you think they're good, they're not going to be good enough in another 10 years. So you need to constantly be modifying and updating your understandings and your behaviours around extreme weather. It's not something we're going to fix now with some investment and that'll sort us out for the next 20 years. All this stuff will probably have to be totally updated within 10 years as it gets more and more extreme. Green manures and cover crops. I think these are the most important ways of building in climate change resilience. Unfortunately, I wasn't here yesterday to listen to Jane's presentation, but I did listen to her Organic Growers podcast while I was picking apples. Absolutely packed with amazing information on green manures. Everyone should listen to it. So, undersowing outside. So interestingly, I've got a good comparison here. So last year, it was last season was a really wet season. We got a bit behind on weeding, and we decided not to undersow all our brassicas so we could keep on weeding later. Big mistake, shouldn't have done that. We came into a very, very wet spring, having been walking up and down all of our crops, kales, Brussels sprouts, leeks, things like that, harvesting all the way through the winter, absolutely destroying the soil structure around those plants by having to walk in and out of a completely waterlogged field. This year I put a massive emphasis on making sure, we always do normally, but if it's weedy I decide not to. Stuff was still a bit weedy this year. We undersowed everything really early in September, put a massive emphasis on getting really good undersowings. We've started sowing paths up our leek plots as well. Anywhere where we're going to do a lot of foot traffic in the winter gets undersown. It's a really, really big priority for us now. And what we find is when we come into spring, anything that was undersowed will ground prep really, really nicely, even after a really, really wet winter. Anything that was left bare, we've walked up and down on, was an absolute nightmare to get ready in the spring this year. Undersowing inside, so we undersow everything inside usually. So again, we haven't done this year, and I think it's caused us some problems. It's the same reason. We wanted to get on top of some weeds, but we find if we undersow tomatoes, cucumbers, beans, aubergines, peppers, any tall crop we can undersow, we undersow. And I think in the winter, in all conditions it helps, but the place where we've really noticed it helps is in really, really hot summers. So in protected cropping, especially if you're using drip lines, your soil health deteriorates very fast away from the drip lines. Moisture is an absolutely crucial part of soil health. And we find having green manures everywhere and the root exudates they put out keeps that soil life fed and alive and keeps the soil in much, much better health. Overwintered green manures, again, Jane talked about this yesterday, so I won't talk too much about it, but we don't want any bare ground anywhere on the farm. As soon as a crop is out the ground, we're literally the next day immediately putting in a cover crop to protect that soil through the winter so it's in good health for us the following year. and relay cropping. You will see almost all of these techniques I learned off Tolly. So all these techniques are in demonstration on this farm right now. A great one for us is relay cropping. So at the end of our rotations, squash, the main ones we do this with is squash and sweet corn. We'll sow a green manure under them quite early in the year, probably like end of July, August. They get under sowing with a multi-species cover crop. What that means is that then goes into a 2-year fertility build, and I haven't got to do another round of ground prep in what are becoming very, very tricky springs. So we do it in the middle of summer when the ground conditions are lovely, and that just goes on into another 2 years of fertility building, and that saves us a lot of problems with very, very wet springs and winters. Diversity, really important for life, really important for growing as well. So, and diversity in lots of ways. We're all market gardeners and veg farmers. We all have, nice diverse cropping systems. So we probably know that anyway. We grow 90 different crop lines of fruit and veg at Abbey Own Farm. There is no weather pattern. It's impossible to get a weather pattern that makes all 90 perform perfectly. That's the whole design of the system. Basically, what we find is whatever the weather pattern, 60 to 70 perform really, really well. And that builds in really good resilience into a system. Diversity of varieties, so obviously the same crop, different varieties of lettuce will thrive in different conditions. To just grow loads of one kind of lettuce is foolhardy. You want to mix it up so that whatever the weather patterns you get, one of them is performing well. Same with things like cabbages, kales, but most of us will be doing that anyway. Seasonal diversity, so it's very interesting. Quite a lot of people now that I've spoken to who focus very much on summer cropping, maybe put a massive emphasis on earning loads of money from tomatoes and things like that, have had a tricky financial summer. Summer's gone. You're not going to get an amazing tomato crop now. If that was part of your financial planning, you might be in quite a sticky place. So for us at the farm, we've had a pretty rubbish summer on summer crops, but our autumn and our winter crops are looking really good and healthy, and that just offers massive financial resilience to climate change. You want to be earning good money from your veg throughout the year now, so that if one of the seasons is terrible, you're picking up that difference in the other seasons. Diverse routes to markets. Everyone learnt in COVID that if you were supplying just restaurants, you are very, very vulnerable. The same can be applied to climate change. If you're reliant on just supplying restaurants in a holiday area and it rains all year and their covers they're doing go down, your sales will go down as well. So it's just good sense to have a mixture of routes to market. So if the weather knocks one of them, if it rains all summer and footfall at the farmer's market is way down, being able to switch or have box schemes or wholesale to pick up, that's really, really important. And then, diversity of incomes, same thing as well. That applies to routes to market, but it applies to having non-veg incomes on your farm, whether that be a bit of livestock, whether that be a campsite, whether that be running educations. We are going to get seasons where the veg is not going to pay the bills. So having other forms of income that you can switch to or that you always nurture on the farm will give you greater resilience as well. Okay, crop plans are just guidelines. Okay, this is what I always say. Last 2 years the crop plan's gone out the window before we've even planted a thing. Now you shouldn't get too obsessed about it. And again, there's a lot of sort of very, very fast turnover, highly planned crop plans in market gardening. And again, if your financial forecasts are based on hitting this very exact crop plan, and like by April you're already not getting stuff in the ground, that's going to hit your income. So you just need to mix it up a bit and be ready to. I've put there, seize the moment. If there's a window to get things in, and you're 2 weeks before you're meant to be putting it in, get it in. 2 years ago I got potatoes in very, very early, and then it rained for about a month and a half. So I had some early potatoes growing quite nicely, and we put them in February. It's well early for putting in potatoes, but it really plugged the gap when the rest of the potato field was really, really late. So and the same applies again. Jane in her podcast spoke lovely about the importance of seizing the moment of getting green manures in September. Now me and my Rosemary might be in it. Me and my senior apprentice spent, not yesterday, but the week before Friday, tearing around like lunatics, sowing green manures absolutely everywhere. It looked like we were going to get a reasonable amount of rain. It's now rained so hard in the last week, I don't think we'll be able to do any more cultivations this autumn. It's that wet on the farm. But all of our bare ground is now soaked with green manure, so I'm not too bothered. And that's that seize the moment, get it in, you know. Learn when to give up. So again, I'm sure lots of people had very pot-bound plug trays by like sort of April this year. And me and my assistant grower always have a bit of argy-bargy. He thinks that once you've propagated it, it has to go in the ground. I'm totally different. Once it's plug-bound, it goes on the compost, you know. All crops have to have a really good start to their lives. If they go in pot-bound, tired and a bit stressed, that's what the end crop's going to look like. So I just jump over that. If it leaves a blank space, think creatively really quickly and fill that space with something else. Also, I think once the crop's in the ground, it's important to learn when to give up, you know. If your lettuces have been swarmed by slugs for ages and ages and ages, don't put loads of effort and money, essentially, in trying to squeeze a few lettuce out of the last surviving batch of 100 and try and get 10, 15. Just wipe them out, get another crop in. That's more financial sense. On the flip side, you need to learn when not to give up. And the example I give with that is in 2022, we had unbelievable flea beetle over all of our brassicas. Ate them back to almost a stem when we planted them. As soon as some rain came, they all came straight back and flourished really, really well. So yeah, learn when your crops have had enough and when you think they've still got a bit of survival in them. They're slightly contradictory, those two things, but you'll know your crops and your ground and when to do both things. So some actual cropping stuff now. So creative use of protected cropping. So we used to be quite like dogmatic and planned and just do the same things in our tunnels all the time. Now I really think on the fly. So this year, early season, we were able to stay inside and keep planting stuff inside. And what I've got really into is, it says at the bottom here, crop stacking in space and time. So I used to underplant crops a bit, you know, have a tall crop with some lettuces growing underneath, and they'd crop at the same time. Now what I'm really into is, and I'll give you some examples. So when we plant all of our tall crops now, we used to plant them in 2 rows down a bed. We now plant everything in a single row down the middle of a bed, and we'll send 2 leaders or 2 separate plants like that up to 2 high wires. And it gives us this lovely big area underneath to grow stuff. So at the beginning of the season, we keep cropping chards and spinaches either sides of our tomato rows. Once the tomatoes really get going, we pull those crops out, but we're always cropping in a space. We don't really want to go, right, the tomatoes are in now, we're not earning money from that bed until they start cropping. We want cash coming out the bed while tomatoes are establishing. And then at the end of the year as well, we do exactly the same. So I've got all my winter spinaches planted up at the moment, but we also still have beds of climbing French beans down the middle. We've got cucumbers still going down the middle of the bed. The spinach right under the plants is a bit slower, but I don't mind that. It's just knocking in a bit of natural succession. But we can just pull the cucumbers and the beans out, and I've already got a fully established crop underneath. We're not flipping beds as such in one mass. It's this constantly relaying cash cropping at the time and something establishing underneath. A few tricks for the height of summer. So if you grow like early season crops in spring in your polytunnels, and you pull them out like spinaches, maybe courgettes, things like that, then you pull them out. It's a weird time. If we have 40-degree summers, there's not many things that like growing in those 3 or 4 months in the height of summer. And there's just a few crops that we've had loads of success with actually. Sweet corn, fantastic in a polytunnel, grows really fast. You can crop it in like 3 months. It crops in the summer, not the autumn. So we've got a big campsite, so we can sell loads of corn and cobs to people on the campsites for their barbecues. We're doing ginger underneath the sweet corn we've tried this year. That works pretty quick. Someone's just digging up our sweet potato crop today. We do lemongrass. These are all things that love extreme heat. And then the other one, which I think Sparrow probably moaned about in his walk round, we've been nailing drying beans. And again, we do our early crops of sugar snaps and French beans, pull these out, and in about May plant loads of drying beans, climbing butterbean and borlotti, and they grow fast and they fill that height of summer gap, and they can take really hot weather quite well. Okay, importance of perennials. Build perennials into your system. no annual ground preparation. So in a really, really wet spring, the apples aren't bothered at all, basically. It might affect the pollination a bit, but no one's got to go out ploughing or bed prepping or untarping or shifting compost around everywhere. They just carry on doing their own thing. More resilient to drought. So in 2022, in the really, really hot weather, we had to put so much effort into producing annual veg, like hauling irrigation around everywhere all day long. And meanwhile, all around me, the apples were just doing their thing, producing an amazing crop. So like, I don't think I wouldn't want to go 100% perennial in organic. Weeds can be a problem, but they're an incredibly resilient part of your system, you know. And again, diversity of perennials. Yeah, so all the different kinds of soft fruit, rhubarb, apples, all the top fruits. If you have diversity, one of them will perform well in those weather conditions. Much more resilient to flood. You know, if you get a catastrophic flood, it will kill all your annual vegetables. It won't kill the apple trees. You know, it'd have to be one hell of a flood to kill your apple trees. And yeah, high financial return for low financial input. So what I mean by that, yeah, they cost a bit to put in, but in terms of what I earn from them, my pruning time and my harvesting time throughout the year is a fraction of what we're earning off the apples. And they tend to come, those things, when I'm quiet. I prune in February, things are just getting busy, but I'm not rushed off my feet, and I'm harvesting now. We're at the peak of our apple harvest now. In fact, the rain harvested them all for us and smashed them onto the floor. So we're picking them all up fast. But they're good. They got hit by monsoon rain, fell off the tree, but as long as I pick them up quickly, they're all in good nick. So yeah, resilience of perennials. Okay, last slide. So for me, these, top 10 Armageddon crops. All right. I'll go through the list. So I've got Brussels sprouts, Russian kale, carrots, parsnips, turnips, potatoes, onions, leeks, beetroot and cabbage. Basically, I've just described a classic old-fashioned English diet. Okay. Now, we've had weather extremes in the past. Like, British growers have been, you know, we've been refining what crops to grow in this country. And I have to say, I think we had pretty dreamy weather for about 10 years where growing squash crop was almost a given, you know. It's not an English crop, you know, and we had really cold nights all the way through the summer, loads of male flowers on the squash plants, courgettes are the same, really late to start cropping. They're high earning crops, they're not very resilient crops. These crops, you know, Brussels sprout, I've never seen any weather condition kill a Brussels sprout plant. You know, it's the true survivor. Russian kale, we've had Russian kale go through -15 and come out the other side of it like it actually really liked it, thrived off the cold. Carrots, yeah, tricky to establish. The early carrots this year are quite tricky to establish, but once you get carrots established, they'll put up with a hell of a lot of rain. They're really deep rooted, so they can put up with drought pretty well because they've got their roots deep down into the moisture. Same with parsnips. Interestingly, nothing eats parsnips other than humans. If we chuck parsnips to the pigs won't eat the parsnips. There are no insect pests that eat parsnips. There are no underground pests that eat parsnips. So yeah, that's a good one for like insect survival. Turnips. No one eats turnips. They will be seen when there's nothing else. Potatoes are tricky, so commercially your yields will go up and down with extreme weather. I reckon, all graded out, we probably yielded 50% of what we wanted to this year, but they're high quality, and in terms of, maybe not financially, but in terms of keeping humans alive, the potatoes crop every year, whatever the weather, we will get a crop out of them. Onions, leeks, we're on good onion and leek ground, but they're an incredibly resilient crop, onions and leeks. You know, even if you get small onions, if you're doing a CSA and you explain to your members, they'll take them, you know. Leeks you can crop almost all year, tough as anything, nothing kills a leek. And they're pretty good in droughts. You know, on my list of what gets the water last in a drought, leeks are pretty low down the list. They'll survive without constant irrigation for quite a long time. Beetroot, again, it's just, root crops are hard, you know, they're tough. So you want to grow lots of like storage root crops, not just for bunching. And cabbages, yeah. Cabbages, some of them you want to pick, make sure in your mix you've got a really, really cold, hardy cabbage. So the ones we'll do, the classic for us is a cabbage called Stanton, and that crops for us in about February, March. Again, that'll take a -15 and look glowing. Lovely and fresh and green in March. And that is... Thank you very much.
Right, hello everyone. Can you hear me? Thumbs up at the back. Thank you. Okay, I'm Dan from School Farm CSA, down in Dibben. So it's quite a small site, 3 acres, some glass houses, not quite as lush as Andy's, but nonetheless very useful. This is most of our site. Actually, you can only see like half the top field there, but we do. In short, what we're doing and the context of what I'll be talking about, we're doing 100 CSA shares every week, year round. CSA started kind of just growing for the season from June till Christmas. We made a pragmatic decision, basically, with the aim of financial sustainability a few years ago, to offer year-round shares, which involved buying in some of the produce from January through till May. A lot of that's from our good friends at Shillingford, who so I hope they're growing the 10 Armageddon crops in large quantity, because we're pretty reliant on them in those months of the year. So yeah, you know, nature of a smaller market garden, we got quite a high focus on higher value crops, greens and that sort of thing. So CSA are the basis the starting point for our crop planning is we want to be able to fill those CSA shares every week. So we want enough of things, never too much. You know, we're a small team. We kind of haven't got the labour. If certain things like say particularly leguminous crops like peas and beans, if we're kind of having 2 successions come at the same time, we're just not going to be able to harvest them. So we're looking week in, week out to have enough but not too much, and kind of nice variety of different crops, but also within each type of crop, a nice mix to offer to our members. So this, that sort of broadly I mean, we haven't got a model for exactly what goes in a box, but if we did, it would be something like an allium, some cooking greens, some salad leaves, a legume for as much of the year as possible, a fresh herb, and I guess a root crop, and then I guess pretty much whatever that the seasonal specials or whatever is there and abundant at that time of year. Obviously in the summer that's going to include a lot of other things. Just remembered I had some notes in my pocket, so I'll get that out. So talk about greens specifically. So greens and salads, they're I think for a small CSA, they're really important crop. I mean, yes, they're high value, but they're also one of the things our members most value. They're one of the things that, because we're picking things and getting them to our customers on the same day, and that you can really see the difference in terms of freshness and quality between sort of shop bought produce. So I think for our members, kind of just really vibrant, interesting greens is a really important one. So in terms of like this, what was on the title of this talk, kind of, I've thought about it in terms of like just building in flexibility as much as possible. So with salad greens, it's like we put a real high priority on like being able to put in the box every week of the year, like really interesting salad mix. And so, so to that end, we're kind of growing a lot of different leaves, obviously, like and lots of different lettuces through the summer into the autumn. A mixture of both like the Salanovas, the ones that are really quick to cut, quick to harvest, and kind of good regrowth, and kind of just interesting open pollinated varieties. But we're also kind of looking for crops that are kind of a bit multifunctional. So we grow, things like agretti under something else in the tunnel, or like New Zealand spinach we grow a bit of out in the field. They're kind of, they're things that if we use them a lot in a salad mix, but they're also, if we've got abundant amounts of salad, they're like really nice standalone vegetables that we could either give to our members or sell otherwise. Likewise, we're always, whenever we're kind of sowing, doing a kind of salad sowing, we're sowing kind of like nice variety of a head lettuce, or a head chicory, or endive, or escarole, or something like that as well. So we're kind of, so it's kind of, that gives us another sort of flexibility. If the kind of mixed leaf is kind of ever thin, we kind of might do a week of heads for our members, which again sort of mixes it up. Or we could just like be cutting those heads and breaking them up into the leaf to kind of have enough of that. Greens, we're kind of, so again, like they feel really critical to kind of what we're offering. So like kales and chards, we're kind of really aiming for like year-round availability. And obviously that they're quite easy. They're quite easy in the sense that they stand there. They're kind of not demanding necessarily to be picked every week. You can approach it and kind of choose what to pick each week. And then things like spinach and kind of oriental cooking greens were kind of which much more sort of seasonally suited. We're sort of in the shoulder seasons in particular, I suppose, growing those again just to give ourselves as many options as possible when it comes to kind of what we're going to put in the boxes each week. Salad leaves and cooking greens, we also choose to wholesale as well. So that's kind of an increasingly important secondary income stream for us, which at first kind of just like with the kind of buying in to support offering a year-round box, that kind of felt slightly difficult as a kind of from the pure CSA mindset that I had a few years ago initially. But it's kind of, we've just, I guess, like the more years under the belt, kind of like the reality of like having to make a project financially sustain itself is kind of has superseded that purism, I suppose. So we wholesale both of these crops like to local restaurants, and that also like brings in just another aspect of flexibility, just like Andy was saying about kind of having diversity in your routes to market. Our priority is the CSA, but if we're kind of like short on a particular crop, we can just like scale down the wholesale that week and kind of to have enough. So it's sort of I wanted to talk a little bit about seed. So I'm not going to talk much in this speech about I don't know, the beetroots or the squash or whatever of this world, where it's kind of I guess in terms of crop planning, like grow loads of them, the more the merrier, whatever your site's suited to. But so when planning for if you've got, in our case, 100 veg shares, certain items are kind of you want to put a single one in each box, and if you've got 97 of if you've got 90 of them in 100 boxes, that can be slightly frustrating. On that note, like having different box sizes in your CSA is kind of quite useful, because you might have 100 overall shares, but if you've only, like inevitably some weeks you're only gonna be harvesting, say, 60 calibres or 60 aubergines or whatever. If you've got different box sizes, just from an organisational perspective, that can just really help sort of like balance out how you're distributing your produce week to week. So yeah, just wanted to talk about like F1 seed and open pollinated seed, and kind of how like our choices around that for different crops. So the crops where we're kind of you kind of putting a single item in a box, like calibres, aubergine, even cucumber, etc. We've made the decision to grow kind of like they're the few F1 crops that we tend to grow. So over the years we've kind of we probably came from a place where we were like trying different varieties of those sorts of things, and we've like really narrowed it down. So now, like for those things, we've just found a single variety, an F1 variety. Sometimes, in the case of aubergines, we're even buying in a grafted plant just for that extra bit of vigor and like resilience to soil-borne diseases. And we're kind of like, I mean, my heart and same with my colleagues, and like our philosophy is like really like open pollinated seeds are really important, and that's kind of the main future. So these kind of feel like, for us, I suppose our perspective is like these are like little sacrifices or whatever, compromises, sorry, that we're making, but they feel really critical to kind of justifying growing these crops at all. So yeah, they're kind of I think like it's more important just to have enough aubergines, for example, week on week, and I think kind of the consistency of these varieties kind of really allows us to plan quite accurately in terms of like our sowing sizes. So we more or less know, we grow 180 aubergine plants, and we can expect most weeks to kind of have an aubergine for all our veg shares through a period of the year. And the odd week there'll be less, and like maybe just the large shares will get it. And similarly with calibres, the varieties, like some of the F1 varieties are so consistent. We know like if we're planting out 2 beds in the field of 300 plants, that's going to give us quite a solid 2 weeks at the peak of harvest, where we're going to have at least 100 calibres heads to go around. So it's kind of the consistency of F1s is sometimes really useful. Having said that, we really want to be growing like open pollinated seeds for them in the majority of cases, and I think our members, our customers, they also want not to just be getting the kind of supermarket varieties. So we and a lot of other crops like the salad crops, tomatoes, etc., beans, peas, are kind of much more they kind of they're open, they're kind of what's the word, they're much more suited. I mean, partly because a lot of those things are like strong inbreeders anyway. The F1s are kind of not so impressive relative to like open pollinated seeds in terms of vigor anyway. But we're definitely focusing on like variety. So it's kind of making, in terms of crop planning, just making pragmatic choices about kind of the kind of when to use the kind of the more expensive professional seeds, and when to kind of look for the more interesting varieties. Bed prep and kind of getting in there in the spring. Obviously Andy's 5 minutes, cool. Andy's talked about that already. I mean, we use a lot of green manures as well, and more every year. We kind of, that's incredibly important. And we also, I mean, small site, we're also kind of using a certain amount of tarps, kind of either to kill off that green manure at a certain point, but in some cases, kind of the tarp sort of on over the winter, just to kind of really give us that, allow us to get on the land really early in the spring and kind of get things out there. And then using that in combination with crop covers, fleece, cozy tex, but also low tunnels, just to get the crops in early, no matter kind of what the spring is. yeah, grouping certain like sowings together as well, so you're kind of not like having transplants, it's not like you've got your early cabbage ready to go out one week and you're like prepping the ground, and then you've got your a load of kale the next week and you sort of, you want to get on there again. It's kind of, because just recognizing that the windows in spring are often like short, and you kind of want to just be able to like prep a whole load of ground at the same time. So kind of things that are going out, things that can get grouped together, doing that. Yeah, briefly, Andy's already spoken again, but that kind of, that absolute importance, obviously the covered spaces are that bit more resilient to the weather, and so just making the most of, particularly in the spring, planning how we fill the kind of early summer veg boxes is like the most accurate bit of our crop plan. After that, it's like, there's going to be abundance, and what we want is the kind of flexibility of how we choose to fill the shares. But for the kind of May-June period, we're really kind of planning quite accurately, like exactly what items and what sowings are going to fill the boxes each week. And the tunnels are like critical to that. So, whatever it is, we try different things each year. And like this was just one thing that worked really well, which we've continued to try to do. It was like, whatever was there over winter came out, and then spring onions and kohlrabi went in just a little bit before the aubergines, and then before the aubergines kind of got to cropping size or became big plants, they were both coming out. Definitely just continuing to experiment. I should say that like I feel lucky I kind of learned, or like when I started out market gardening, there was no sort of spreadsheet and crop plan, and that I still feel like that, even though I've kind of fallen in love with spreadsheets these days, and as a lot of us I think can get a bit geeky about them and enjoy them, but I really value the fact that the guy I learnt from just grew up on a farm in Devon, and he just sort of, there was so much in there, and we'd walk around and it was responsive, and there were kind of like dates that he sort of just had stuck in his mind, but most of it was just sort of seeing and sort of reading the season and being responsive. So like 100%, that is like, I think the key thing about the crop plan is don't stick to it. Like in autumn, I think, having said all that, I think that particularly kind of going into the autumn and the winter, I think like learning some sowing times for certain crops is really important. It's kind of like, there might be flexibility in the spring. In the spring, it might be worth sort of taking some gambles on like an early sowing, but in the autumn, it's kind of, like that kind of first week of July is just like drummed into me for the chicory, and like first week of August for spinach, etc. So kind of just and again, these things aren't going to be universal. So learning them for your site in particular, or like speaking to your neighbours or that sort of thing. And again, just like flexible crops. So like we've started growing a lot of Napa cabbage, which I think's there somewhere, and absolutely loads of chicory. Both really flexible, like they work very well as a head. They can stand and store well, but they can also be broken up into salad mixes, and kind of they're really like essential crops for us. Oh yeah, last slide. So. Last thing, it's not about crop planning, but in the CSA context, I think like one of the almost the most important thing is like how you communicate with your customer base, with your members. There will be good years and there will be bad years, and the people who come to the CSA model, they're very much like looking for and wanting more than a veg box. They're wanting a kind of involvement and connection. So how you but making time to communicate sort of with all those people can be incredibly difficult, particularly in the midst of like, you know, when there's like 100 jobs screaming at you to do in the garden. So we've definitely, like, I mean, well, I feel like, you know, failed at sort of fantastic communication at times, and then paid the price. And it yeah. So just, you know, emphasising. I think a hard year, you know, really like the difference between like good sort of good, and by good I sort of just mean like honest, just like really painting the picture of what it's like. And I think like CSA is about sharing the risks and rewards, and as long as the risk isn't that, you know, if the risk is like that you don't really know what you're doing, then maybe that's a risk too far. But there's so many like risks in terms of the weather and the changing seasons that we're having to deal with, and I think people will get that. And if you can really sort of effectively paint the picture and sort of bring people into the farm and kind of, and because I think they want to be there with you, then I think going through, you know, if you communicate that well, you're going to have members who are like even more supportive of like what you're doing at the end of the year, even if the veg shares have been thin. Whereas like if you've just yeah, you know, been too busy and kind of, and like feeling, you know, maybe bad that you're kind of not giving people quite what they're paying, you know, quite what they're paying for, but you know, people aren't kind of really hearing your side of the story, then you might end up losing members and struggling. So I think, yeah, communication makes all the difference, and we try and do that in a variety of ways, like lots of events at the farm, as well as newsletters and volunteer days and that sort of thing. All right, thank you.
If you speak up really loudly so audience and two speakers can hear, because we all shout it out.
That's all brilliant, thank you so much. I still feel like it must be like unbelievably complicated. I don't know if it's very small scale, but like you have to plan how much of the thing you need, how do you know how much to put in the ground, what if the weather changes, later or early, once it's out of the ground, you need to have it ready to go around, but you don't want to like get things too early so that they get spot bound. Like, is there like some framework you guys follow? Is there like resources you went through to learn how to do crop planning?
So I could jump in and say so. Yeah, I think, I mean, as far as I'm aware, I think like hardly anyone starts from complete scratch on that. Like, you know, if you're setting out, yeah, like, you know, you know, it's this amazing community sort of in the organic market gardening farming world, isn't it? And I think that, you know, generally people are all too sort of willing to sort of share their crop plan with you, and obviously one person's crop plan might be a lot more relevant than someone else's, but so finding, you know, others who sort of in a sort of fairly kind of equivalent setup, and kind of, yeah, I like to begin from nowhere and put a whole crop plan together for a new business would be a huge and sort of, you know, incredibly difficult undertaking. But so I think in general people are kind of taking from others and maybe like combining and sort of, you know, or taking the bits that feel most relevant and then tweaking, and like, and yeah, when you're kind of, you know, as the years go by, it's the tweaking that is, you know, is the important bit. It's like, it's the learning from your well, records if you're, you know, good at that sort of thing, or just your memory if you're not, kind of learning as a team from like what worked and what didn't, not being too reactive, because like, you know, like one year might be completely different from the next, like, but learning the things that are kind of consistently good, and like, oh yeah, like trying a few new things every year, and like some of those things you try might be just straight off the hoof, they might not be planned at all. So yeah, I think it's all about the tweaking. But.
Yeah, I totally agree with the tweaking. I always say you're crop planning 12 months of the year. So although you might sit down and do a big crop plan in the winter, I've got a notebook that just gets scribbled in all year long and loads of stuff in my head, and then that tweaking bit's really important. If you're doing it for the first time, what I would always recommend is start from the customer backwards. So there's no point in growing it if you can't sell it. So basically go backwards. If you're doing a box scheme, like do a vague box plan for the year, and then crop plan backwards from that. Then add loads of extra stuff in there for resilience. You're not ever going to grow exactly the right amount of things for a box scheme. You know. So yeah, I think yeah, and then yeah, I thought it was very interesting what Dan said about the farmer he learned from Devon. I think there are coming to the marketplace right now some very complicated, various different, very good, very complicated crop planning software packages. Now they worry me slightly because of exactly what I talked about in that presentation, which is doesn't matter how good your plan is when you're sat at your desk in January or December when you're doing crop planning. You know, I don't think I've had a single year where in 15 years where I've been able to deliver the crop plan exactly as I came up with it. So I think when you're doing it, your crop plan work customer backwards, you know, actually you're planning for something rather than I'm going to grow all these things and then try and sell them. I think it's completely the wrong way around of doing it. That's all very well and good if you're just trying to feed yourself or it's a hobby. If it's commercial horticulture, you need to know where all this stuff's going to go. That'll then tell you how much you need to grow, how often you need to do successions, what's going to be too much, you know. Dan was saying, like, runner beans, there's nothing clever about producing 4 times the amount of runner beans that you need, you know. So you've got to be really careful about overproduction. It's not clever, it's actually really inefficient overproducing. You always want, I mean, I always say if you're starting out, I'd crop plan for an extra 25%, expecting to lose it.
Okay.
Yeah.
We've probably got time for 1 or maybe 2 more questions.
CSA network and we have a tool on our website.
Okay. Yes, let's take.
100%. So I literally, with every year that goes past, am buying more and more seed from Real Seeds. And the reason I'm doing that is because you have, you know, the thing that really catches my eye, and I've just bought a load of lettuces for winter, is the word, well, basically anywhere in Eastern Europe. You know, they get proper savage winters, and they're growing crops through the winter. That's, you know, talking about not knowing what comes next. If I've got a lettuce variety that will stand in the snow in Ukraine in the middle of winter, it's going to cope with a bit of, you know, English frost, you know, or maybe a -10. So 100%. And actually, it's like necessity's the mother of invention. I've known all the theory around open pollinated seed and all its resilience. It wasn't until I started getting crops killed by really cold weather that I've actually started doing it. So I think, yes, really, really important. Also the nature of open pollinated. So with Savoy cabbages I grow one F1 variety, which is Formosa, and the only reason I don't grow very much is because I can know I get my first really early crop of Savoy, bang, in the bank, start selling it. Then all the rest of our Savoy production is open pollinated because I want a big patch that I can slowly pick 20, 30 cabbage from a week, but do that over 4 or 5 months and open pollinated, and that comes into the climate change stuff as well. It's like if everything's coming, if the cabbages are coming to their prime at different times over 4 or 5 months, what we find is if a cabbage is fully hearted up and ready and you get a -12, it gets damaged and you can't sell it. If it hasn't hit its prime, it tends to survive the cold better. So if they're all coming to their prime at different times, then that's much better resilience. You might lose some, but you haven't lost all of them. Whereas with an F1, if they were all ready and I got hammered by a frost, I'd lose the lot. Yeah, so totally.
Okay. Think about it. Okay. Yeah.
It was just about your stacking in garden space. So I really take the point of getting.
Can you speak a bit louder?
Rotation's key. So
Can you repeat the question? We couldn't hear.
So it was about crop planning in space and time, and how do you build fertility as you're using everything all the time for loads of different things, I think was the gist of it.
So
Did
if
you
I-
hear that? Okay.
If I use tomatoes as an example, okay, I will, as soon as we come back after New Year, we'll sow loads and loads of chards and spinach, plant up loads of beds. You know, we'd have cropped like kind of autumn winter brassicas in there, pat choice, Chinese cabbage. That comes out. We then go straight in with full beds of chard and spinach, 3-row system. And then what we do is we propagate the tomatoes. As soon as the tomatoes are ready, we pull out the middle row of spinach out of the bed, plant the tomatoes in. We then keep cropping the chard and spinach. As soon as and I always say if you're sharing a bed, that's a tomato bed, and I happen to be borrowing a little space of it, you know, for chard and spinach, the minute I'm worried about a negative impact on the tomatoes, they come out straight away, the chards and the spinaches. As soon as they come out, we're straight in with an undersowing green manure straight under the tomatoes. So a lot of those vertical stacking and time stacking things, almost always, once the cucumber or the tomato starts getting going and cropping, the secondary crop comes out from underneath and we undersow everything like that. And then once in the rotation, it's normally, so in the case of the tomatoes, after Christmas, we'll do a deep application of compost on the tomato beds and then plant the spinach into that. So we've done it like a crop ahead of the tomatoes. We feel that kind of lets it get going and the soil life get activated and get it mobilised. But we're green manures everywhere, wherever, whenever we can, basically.
Thank you ever so much, you two.